And now, Law and Court dictates for us to broadcast our informative segment called Law and Court. This is a presentation of attorney and counselor at law, Mr. Daniel J. Wright. Here on this upcoming set, our well-known CPA, Mr. Adil Baloch, has a whole bunch of questions for Attorney Wright regarding child support. Let's hear out these two gentlemen.
Good morning, viewers. Welcome to the Capitol Forum. My name is Adil A. Baloch. I'm a certified public accountant and a certified tax resolution specialist with my office in Montgomery Village, Maryland. With me here once again is Attorney Daniel J. Wright with his office in Rockville, Maryland, right by the courthouse. A very vast experience spread over decades in multiple specialties that he practices in. Today, we will learn a few things about child support from him. His experience and his expertise, I'm sure, is going to be helpful for some people that might be needing help with in understanding the subject. So first of all, Attorney Wright, welcome to the studios.
Nice to see
Thank
you
you
again.
for coming in and agreeing to share your expertise with us one more time. So as I mentioned, we are talking about child support today. What exactly is child support?
Well, this is the support or the money that every parent owes to their children. In Maryland, the law presumes that children are entitled to the support of both parents, two parents. Each parent has to pay to support their children. So even if the children are living with one parent, that parent pays and the other parent pays as well.
So that support that you're mentioning, both parents being responsible for that support. Obviously, different people have different lifestyles, and different people support their children differently. How do you calculate, or how do you know?
Well, the idea is that the children shouldn't suffer because the parents divorced. It should try to recreate the same level of lifestyle that they had prior to the separation. In Maryland, as in most states, there's a formula for the determination of child support. It's based primarily on the parents' income, both parents' income. And it's based upon their gross income, not their net income. It's a formula. It's a back-of-the-envelope calculation. It's not very precise. Sometimes it seems a little off, either too low, it can sometimes be too high, but it is what it is. We don't make individual determinations of what a person can afford or how much the children need. It's a mathematical calculation based upon a very limited number of inputs. These would, in addition to the party's income, include things like work-related daycare expenses, cost of health insurance. Sometimes there are medical expenses that aren't covered by insurance. Sometimes children have specialized educational needs, maybe for a tutor or some occupational therapist or speech and language therapist or something like that. These can go into the formula, but not much more. The expenses of the children are divided in relation to the relative income of the parents. So if one parent earns 60% of the total family income, then that parent is going to pay 60% of the expenses, such as work-related daycare.
So basically, there is a formula to pay for the ordinary and necessary expenses to maintain the status quo of life. Whatever the lifestyle was before has to continue on.
They have a formula instead of spending a whole day in court to try to figure out how much a person spends on rent, how much a person spends on food, how much a person spends for their transportation expense. They wanted to make it easier for the parties to calculate child support, maybe even on their own, so that more people would actually seek child support. They wouldn't have to pay attorneys thousands of dollars, and they would be more inclined to do it, and the benefit of that would flow to the children.
I can understand. I can see the logic and doing all that.
If it isn't,
sure.
if it isn't quite exact, at least it's cheaper and hopefully easier to arrive at
Correct.
an approximate number for what the child support should
Correct.
be.
That's right. That's a good point. So what happens if the if let's say child support is not an issue here now, but the custodial parent has issues with not letting the other parent come and visit the kids? Does that affect?
happens a lot, and what happens is the person who's paying child support might withhold the payment because he or she is not being allowed to see the kids, and they use the payment of child support as a leverage to get a better visitation. It can happen the other way around too, where a custodial parent who hasn't been paid child support will deny visitation to the non-custodial parent. Both of these are not correct. It's not a reason not to pay child support. These are two issues on a separate track. Child support is the children's money, and it isn't right to punish them for the wrongdoings of the parent.
Sure.
And at the same time, a child has a right to see their parent, and the parent has a right to see their child. And if there's a dispute about whether the correct amount of child support has been paid, that's not a reason to deny the child a right to see their parent.
Interesting. Now, along the same lines, probably not as similar as this one, but what about a parent getting a child support from the other? Obviously, it is for the children. What if the parent decides to spend the money on themselves?
That is a very common fear, and it's something that the court won't really care too much about. The law does not provide for one party to require an accounting from the other party on how they spent the money.
Wow.
It's assumed that raising children costs money. Anyone who's had kids knows that for sure. But whether the other party sees it being spent or not is another issue. You don't get to dictate to the other party how they spend their money. It just isn't.
So it's just a good faith effort on both sides. It's one trusting the other to pay, and the other trusting the other to
It's not a question of trust. It's not a question of trust. Many people feel that maybe the custodial parent wastes money or goes out to the bar and drinks or something like that. But you don't get to dictate the lifestyle of your former spouse or
Sure.
other party, and you don't get to require them to account for how they spent their money. The fact is, everybody knows it costs a lot of money, and if you don't see how it's being spent, it still has to be spent anyway. So if they required people to give an accounting for how they spent their money, we would need many more judges and courts.
Let's just go to the other side now. We talked about one parent making the payment, and the other one may or may not be using it for the purpose intended. But what about the other side, where one parent who's supposed to be paying the child support based on the formula? It's obvious now. It's at least decided that this parent is going to be paying an X amount of child support to the other parent. What if this other the parent who's responsible for paying the child support loses their job, or they go unemployed, or something happens? Things happen.
That can happen, and that would allow the paying parent to go to the court and request a modification of the amount of child support. So if you've suffered a diminution in your salary, and it's quite large, or if you lost your job, you need to go to court and ask the court to modify the amount of your child support. Otherwise, the ordered amount continues right on. It doesn't matter if you've lost your job. You have to go to court and change it, or else that court order remains in effect. You can file easily. It's not hard to do, and if a person even doesn't feel capable of doing it on their own, there's a office in Maryland called the Office of Child Support Enforcement. You can go to the Office of Child Support Enforcement and they'll help you. There are pro bono attorneys who will help you to fill out the forms correctly. And so there's no reason why someone who loses his job should accumulate a big debt of arrearages of child support, because the means is available to modify child support when you've lost your job. If you don't, then you're going to ultimately get in trouble. If the child support is being monitored by the Office of Child Support Enforcement and you don't pay, they will impose certain types of sanctions, starting with losing your driver's license. They have the authority to notify the Motor Vehicle Administration that a party isn't paying child support, and under the law, the MVA will suspend your license. Other things they will do is intercept your tax returns. If you won the lottery, they'll intercept your lottery. It's very hard to avoid the payment if you lead a normal life.
So it's almost like creating bad luck for yourself.
It is. It really is.
So let me just ask you one other question from a different angle. We're pretty much getting towards the end of the program now. Same situation. This person makes money, works.
Yes.
But what if this person has ways and means to actually hide the income? They do only cash transactions. They do not file tax returns, claiming that they do not have a job or they don't do anything, but they're still working. For whichever way, under the table is what it's called, the slang for it. Only cash transactions that are easily hidden, and so on and so forth. What happens in those kind of situations?
This is a big problem, and many people are dishonest about declaring their income, and it's hard. It can be very hard to reconstruct what someone's actual income is. Nevertheless, there are some techniques, and as an accountant, I think you probably could be of great assistance. We can try to go back and review bank records if a person has a bank account and see what their deposits were. We can look at their expenses, and if their expenses every month are $5,000, then they must be earning $5,000.
Right.
It isn't easy, and it isn't always successful. Sometimes we need help of professionals such as yourself, but it can be done. And we can discover assets, but more importantly, we can determine an approximate amount of someone's income if they refuse to honestly declare what it is.
It's pretty sad in certain situations. Hopefully, this never happens to anyone. Looks like we are pretty much at the end of the program. Let me just wrap it up by thanking you, first of all.
Thank you.
And thanking our viewers for spending the time with us. Hopefully, this was of some value to some people out there. Obviously, it has added to the knowledge base of pretty much who tuned in today. Thank you very much for being with us. Thank you for being here, Dan.
Thank you.
We will see you next week.